In the fall of 2008, a financial crisis rocked the global economy and exposed cracks in the international financial architecture.
And a regulatory regime basically crafted in the wake of a 20th century economic crisis, the Great Depression, was overwhelmed by the speed, scope, and sophistication of a 21st century global economy.
In normal times, financial markets provide credit, which greases the wheels of the global system. When credit markets shut down, the consequences can be dire.
Our system of credit is frozen, which is keeping American businesses from financing their daily transactions and creating uncertainty throughout our economy.
Like any financial crisis, the damage from this one has fallen on the guilty and innocent alike. It affects everybody around the globe.
For a large number of countries, there are no green shoots of recovery. There are only fallow fields. The real impact of the crisis could stretch for years.
Some took on too much risk.
Недооценка рисков крупнейшими финансовыми компаниями в сочетании с агрессивной финансовой политикой самой большой экономики мира привели не только к убыткам корпораций. Беднее, к сожалению, стали большинство людей на планете.
But other victims had been fiscally conservative and responsible. This isn't the first time a financial crash has threatened the world economy.
1929, Black Tuesday. The New York Stock Exchange is in a panic. Frantic investors have scrambled to unload their stocks at any price. Everyone wants to sell. No one wants to buy. The stock market crash has come, and the Great Depression has begun.
With the 1930s in mind, world leaders gathered after World War II to tighten international rules for global finance. They created the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, which was designed to prevent future financial collapses, or at least tame their effects. But by the 1970s, many of the Bretton Woods rules had become untenable in increasingly integrated and volatile markets.
In full cooperation with the International Monetary Fund and those who trade with us, we will press for the necessary reforms to set up an urgently needed new international monetary system.
The world turned to policies that laid the groundwork for deregulation. Over the next 30 years, global markets became increasingly sophisticated and integrated, unleashing the entrepreneurial spirit of people all around the world.
Globalization represents the best hope to improve the lives of the world's population. It's created growth and wealth and fostered trade and interdependence.
But over time, this less regulated financial system revealed at least three major weaknesses. First, emerging economies like China invested their savings in the United States, providing a glut of cheap credit that fueled American debt and overconsumption.
Long-term structural challenges confront both of our economies. For the United States, the challenge is to save more and spend less. For China, the challenge is to save less and consume more.
Second, as global regulation became more lax, so did global monitoring.
I made a mistake in presuming that the self-interest of organizations, specifically banks and others, was such as that they were best capable of protecting their own shareholders and the equity in the firms.
I think there was a failed regulation system, in a sense, across the world, against the background of a philosophy, a set of beliefs in the way that markets were self-correcting and efficient, which has turned out to be wrong.
Third, as the global financial system transformed, international institutions established in less complex times found it increasingly difficult to handle new financial crises.
It is ridiculous to think that institutions built for the problems of 1945 are ideally suitable for the problems of 2009.
These weaknesses led to a dramatic proliferation of crises.
In the last generation, we have seen in the financial sector the Latin American debt crisis, the 1987 stock market crash, the commercial real estate collapse, and the S&L debacle, the Mexican financial crisis, the Asian financial crisis, the LTCM liquidity crisis, the bursting of the NASDAQ bubble, and Enron, all of that before the events of the last 2 years. That works out to something a bit over one major crisis every 3 years.
Today, the global financial crisis, now a global economic crisis, has focused policymakers' minds on the need for difficult reforms. That means improving regulatory standards, fostering good domestic policies, and retooling the IMF and the World Bank so that they can better help governments navigate the global economic turmoil.
In globalization, we don't need less multilateralism. We need more multilateralism. We don't need less IMF. We need more IMF. And the condition is that the fund has to be both relevant and legitimate. Relevant means that the fund has to adapt to globalization, to adapt to a new kind of financial crisis.
It also means increasing the representation of emerging economies like China, India, and Brazil.
These reforms must be aimed at building an international architecture that reflects the realities of the 21st century.
But will incorporating new voices with distinct interests lead to more cooperation or less? Initial efforts to coordinate have been made by the Group of 20.
E nós estamos propondo que o G20, que é organismo que representa os 20 países mais importantes do mundo, ele passa a ter uma função mais importante, que ele possa participar, que ele possa ter uma atuação direta nas crises.
But it remains to be seen whether the crisis will unite states under a reformed international financial system or push them further apart.